Welcome to the Idea to Value podcast, where in every episode we highlight the latest insights into creativity and innovation from experts around the world. I'm your host, Nick Skillicorn. I care about the evidence behind what makes ideas happen, and I've already helped thousands of people just like you through my unique insights into recent scientific findings of how creativity works. I also show you how to turbocharge innovation programs so they finally deliver on the value and ideas you've been struggling to execute. Get your free training on how creativity can be improved by registering now at www.ideatovalue.com. Now let's get on with today's episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Idea to Value podcast. Today, I've got Joshua Seth with me. Joshua has got a long history in the creative arts, everything from mind-bending keynote speaking to being the voice of apparently over 100 characters across animation and film. And today, we're going to be talking about how you can improve your own creativity. Josh, it's wonderful having you here.
It's wonderful having me here as well.
So for people who haven't heard of
what I did there, see, that's a creative answer right there.
It is. So for people who haven't heard of you before, could you just give us a quick background as to how you got started in the creative fields that you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, as with all things, starts in childhood, right? Nature, nurture, creativity is primarily the way that you were brought up. My parents are both psychologists, and my stepfather is an artist, visual artist, painter, and glass blower. And there was just creativity in abundance around my home. I did 8 shows a week, 8 shows a week for like 10 years in musical theater on a professional level for touring Broadway casts from the time I was 8 to 18. And then as an adult, was trained in New York City at NYU, Tisch School of the Arts, where, you know, I learned more about the foundations and principles and more aspects of these creative endeavors. Then I went out to Hollywood, and for about 10 years was the voice of about 100 animated TV shows and movies. I'm the star of a movie called Akira, which is lauded as one of the it's always the top anime movie on all those lists. I play Tai, the leader of the Digimon, on a series of movies and television series called Digimon. I'm on SpongeBob, all kinds of stuff like that. But eventually I started going bonkers, being isolated from human beings and the sun, being in a recording studio in Hollywood, and I hit the road. And then I spent the next 10 years traveling the world as a psychological illusionist, which is sort of like doing brain games in an interactive fashion with the audience. Did a few TV specials in Japan and South Korea and other places, and thousands of shows. And along the way, wrote a few books, and then started speaking about creativity. And companies wanted to talk about how to unlock and unleash the creativity within teams and organizations. And of course, their objective is to use the creativity for creative problem solving and to create innovations. And then, so that ended up being my focus, and that's mostly what I do now, is speaking about that in an interactive fashion from the platform at corporate events and the like, using my cards and my book as the sort of the foundation of the ideas that I express.
And what sort of ideas do you express? What's behind the Joshua Seth's way of improving creativity?
Well, number one is, before you hit record on this, you said, what are your objectives that you want to achieve? And I said, I don't want to put that in my head. So I guess that would be number one, is let go of expectations. We limit our creative capacity when we go into a situation with a clearly defined goal or objective. And I know we're supposed to have goals, blah, blah, blah. You ship adrift, and you have to begin with the end in mind. Yes, in a general sense, totally agree. Begin with the end in mind. Right? What's our objective here? We want to have an experience as a team where, you know, we get to know each other more and come up with some ideas that can move our process forward. Something like that in a general sense. But like in a very specific sense, like, yeah, we want to achieve this little specific marker. Well, then you're blinding yourself to all the other opportunities that may exist out there. If I come on as a podcast guest and I'm like, yeah, I want to express idea A, B, and C, and I want to promote D, like that, that's a recipe for a boring interview as far as I'm concerned, because we've already determined in advance what the experience is going to be. Therefore, we are not in the moment. and in the moment is where all possibility exists. That would, I suppose, be my jumping off point. I mean, I did write this book on focus, and the reason I think focus is so important is because we tend to focus on everything but what's happening right now. We're in our little screens. Like, I travel a lot. I travel out of the country a lot. I give myself a lot of downtime because that's where ideas come from, right? It's not staring at a screen, and it's not the doing of the thing. It's stepping away from the doing of the thing and clearing your mind and freeing your mind so that the spark of inspiration can come in.
So just to touch on that, there's an idea forming with me, which you're talking about not having any preconceived outcome that you're working towards, but you're also talking about being able to focus to unlock your creativity. Doesn't the focus require you to be going in some direction though, or what is the focus that you're talking about?
You can have a general objective, a general objective. But if you're like, okay, I'm going to fill my time today in this session, in this experience, in this calendar day, whatever have you, and you fill up all that free time with all this busy work so that you can achieve a specific outcome, that is by design not going to give you maximum creativity. You could say, like, okay, coming from animation, let's say, hey, this is a scene about, right? Here's who my character is. Here's what my relationship to the other characters are, and here's the objective that I want to achieve. That's what when we sit down, a bunch of us, writers, director, music and effects guy, the other cast members, and we're brainstorming essentially in our own creative way. That's what we have in mind. Okay, like, this is what we want out of the scene. This is the relationship with each other. This is who I am at my core, and that informs all the other stuff. But we keep it general like that, and then we allow a conversation to evolve, right? Let's say you want to achieve something in your business, like all our customers are getting pissed off because it takes too long to achieve the results of the order that they have placed for this service or product, something like that, right? If you're too deliberate about getting from here to there, and you start to map it all out at the beginning, you blind yourself to all the other opportunities. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah.
So the focus piece of this doesn't have to do with the process that you're engaged in. It has to do with how you're relating to your own mind. So my other part of my background is as a hypnotist and hypnotherapist. I did like 1,000 shows before I focused in on being a psychological illusionist. They were all hypnosis shows. I did like 400 colleges across the United States. I did like 100 cruise ship gigs. I did, all these other kinds of events for years before I became bored with that and then moved on to this next thing. Because I continuously follow wherever my creative passion is leading me. A lot, like when people talk about, well, I don't know where it came from. I was just a vessel for this inspiration. It's like, I don't think of this in some sort of religious esoteric way. I think of it as keeping yourself open to these opportunities and being brave enough to pursue them. So from a hypnotic perspective, there's beta, alpha, delta, and and theta brain wave states. And all you got to know is people keep themselves stuck in the non-creative state because they got the news on, because they're scrolling through social media, because actually, first chapter of the focus book. I'm not trying to pitch my focus book. It's just in my hand. The first chapter I talk about Digimon. Okay, so if you're not familiar with this show, it was the #1 animated Saturday morning TV show in America when it came out, which was 19 years ago, which makes me wizened. First scene, first episode. My character is sitting in a tree at summer camp, and he's talking about all his friends at summer camp, and we're all out playing in the sunlight with each other. It's what he's talking about is unstructured creative play. I started out in Montessori school. My kids went through Montessori school. Montessori school is based in this concept that we learn through play, and it shouldn't all be structured, right? If it's too structured, then you don't allow real interactions to take place, real learning and creativity and exploration to occur. So all this is happening at the beginning of Digimon, and then all of a sudden the sky opens up and these digivices whoosh, drop into their hands. Now this is before smartphones. They call them digivices. and life has now imitated art. The rest of the series of Digimon is the struggle that the Digidestined, these kids have, between the real world and the digital world. And the digital world is sucking them out of the real world, and they are fighting to get back. Isn't that what we're all dealing with now? Right? To clear our minds, focus on the present moment, each other, who we are, where we are right now, in the here and now. In the creativity cards, the very first step in the process is focus. So before we try to achieve an objective, let's just focus on where we are, who we are, what is happening. I do that through music. I do that through breathing. I do that through some gameplay that we do. Everything starts with the breath, right? So when you take a moment and you change your breathing, you change your mental state, you change your emotional state, you change your capacity to receive and process and communicate ideas. The step before the creativity. Creativity is the step before innovation, right?
Absolutely.
Creativity is where the ideas, pardon?
Absolutely, I said.
Yeah. So creativity is where the ideas come from that lead to the outcomes that we call innovative, right? Companies say they value innovation, but then they don't want to take a step back and recognize the importance of creativity. If they do that and you get to the point where, okay, now we recognize the importance of unleashing the creativity, it still behooves you to take a step prior to that, right? And focus on the breath, focus on being present, focus on being the vessel and allowing the ideas to come through you, not being in your ego and thinking these ideas are coming from me and my personality and my experience and my bigly brain and so forth, but to release all of that and just go. Now, in my experience, the people in the business world hate this. They hate this because they're taught from a very young age, yeah, I have to work hard and get an A on a test so that I can be an A student, so I can get into a good college, so that I can get a good job, so I can make a lot of money. So that it's a process like that, right? My girlfriend's a cybersecurity expert at a big multinational, head of cybersecurity, right, VP level. I have attempted to impress upon her the importance of taking 20 minutes. Your natural ultradian rhythms change every 20 minutes, right? There are the flow that you're in through that beta, alpha, delta, theta brainwave states occur whether you're awake or asleep, to go back to the hypnosis concept. And it behooves us to remove ourselves from the grind, the daily experience of doing things and not do and unplug for a moment and listen to some, say, calming binaural beat music or a self-hypnosis session, or just being present and just breathing, and whether you do a mantra like an om or not, being the observer, so that if a thought comes into your brain, you just acknowledge it and release it instead of think about it. The not doing, the not thinking, and so forth. That's what allows you to focus and be present. So that, for instance, all the many words coming out of my face here, they're not preconceived. I'm not referring to a sheet with a bunch of bullets. When I speak up on the stage, I don't have to like read a script or anything like that. I know, I'm present, right? And that's why that first category here is focus. So to get us present. Another way I do that is through music. So like when I'm writing a book, I've written a few books now, I always listen to the same song over and over and over. It doesn't have any words in it. It used to be a playlist. I used to listen to, actually, it was Underwater Sunlight by Tangerine Dream. Mm-hmm. and whale sounds and things like that in the music. These days I listen to a song called Deep Draw. That's all that's happening in this. I don't listen to it at any other time than when I'm sitting down to write. When I'm sitting down to write, I always listen to it. I never have writer's block because my brain, my emotions, my experience, it's all being triggered by that music to do a certain thing. Am I going, should we stop, take a pause, take a breath? This is all that beat before, that focus.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, I'm loving where we're going right now. And I want to touch on
something going back to the start of your creative journey. You said you were in musical theater, and then you were doing voice work, and then you're doing stage productions, and now you're doing keynotes and all of these things. I want to ask about what your actual creative process and creative input was into each of those realms. Because some people would say if you're on stage performing, then you're just performing someone else's ideas. When you're a voice actor, you're just reading the words of someone else's script. And if I want to play devil's advocate, then where's the creativity in that at all?
Sure. Well, Shakespeare's been around for 500 years, and there have been many people that have put their imprint, their unique voice into those characters, right? So it's like jazz. Let's look at it that way, okay? Jazz isn't pure improvisation. It's improvisation around a theme, right? So the script is the theme. It's the jumping off point, right? It's the sandbox in which we play, right? That's the script. But then it's up to us as actors and performers to give life to it, to do something with it. The sand and the toys and the box itself, they exist, but they're just sitting there lifeless until we do something with them. So that's where that creativity comes in the interpretation and the use to which we put those tools that are given to us. And that's enhanced through collaboration, because as a voice cast, for instance, not just the actors, but the writers, the director, the producers, all those people come into that process and contribute to it. And if I were doing this alone, it wouldn't have the same impact and it wouldn't have the same dynamism as it does as a result of that collaborative process. Same thing on stage. Even though I'm the headliner on stage and I'm the one, with the light on my face, there could be 50 other people involved in this process, hitting cues, doing room design, lighting and sounds. I could do it, sure, on my own, by myself, but it wouldn't have the same resonance, impact. It wouldn't be at the same level if I were doing it in isolation. And in fact, I think that's what holds a lot of people back from thinking that they are creative, which of course we all are. You just look at children. But we're trained out of being able to use it and express it through fear of embarrassment or being shown up to be a fraud, right? People have ideas and don't put them forth because they have imposter syndrome, for instance, or they're afraid of being embarrassed, or they're afraid people will say their idea is bad, which there's no such thing, right? There's some sort of quote about everyone's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, you'll think it a failure.
It'll feel like a failure, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I speak a lot to accountants and CPAs and comptrollers, and I've been doing a lot of that stuff lately because they're very literal, linear thinkers, and their business model is being upended by technology and exponential changes that are happening in our society as a result of it. So what their jobs will look very different in 5 years than they do right now. And they're aware of that. And then they're afraid of that because their brains are very sort of straightforward in the way that they see the world and do what they do. I mean, imagine you spent 20 years, you went to school to become very good at this thing, and then software, an algorithm, some sort of piece of AI comes along and does it better, faster, and cheaper than you. What happened? Where's your value anymore, right? So they're just one subset of the culture that is beginning to grapple with that. So I'll come and I'll speak to them, and they'll say, "Well, I'm not a creative person." Well, of course you are. You have just divorced yourself from that innate ability. So how do you let it out? How do you express it? There's a certain safety in numbers, right? In doing it in a collaborative fashion. But there's also a third, like when you get 2 or more people together, there's that mastermind that is created. There is that other, that is the greater overarching, all-encompassing sort of consciousness that emerges as a result of like what you and I are doing right now. I wouldn't be expressing any of these words or thoughts or ideas, which once I get the recording, I will then repurpose.
Absolutely.
Right? And it's only coming about because of the interaction and the communication.
And so for those people that you go and speak to who don't feel that they're that creative themselves, how do the techniques or tools that you have in your brainstorming cards help them get over the hurdles that they have with creativity?
Sure. Oh, that gets back to your idea about is it sequential or not? Well, there's 54 cards because it's a deck of cards. So that's how many are in it, by the way. There's 52 in like a playing
A pair
card
of
deck.
jokers.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just use that as my sandbox, right? Like I like the idea of having some limitations on the creative process because sure, anything is possible, but if you don't give yourself some boundaries for the creative expression, if there aren't four corners to the piece of paper or the wall or whatever that you're painting on or expressing yourself out into, then there's no form or structure and it's too amorphous. So I like the fact that, okay, there's going to be 54. Now, how can I break this down? And how does that subdivide and what can we do with the math and so forth? So your question relates to how does this help them free themselves or break out of the process? Contrast it with normal Osborne style brainstorming. Everybody give me your best ideas, how many ideas you can come up with in a given amount of time. From where? It's scary, right? How am I supposed to do this? Is what people think. Okay, now let's apply something on top of it, a refinement like scamper, like the scamper technique, right? Okay, now we can look at things, from a different perspective. We can maximize it, we can minimize it, we can eliminate things. This is all having to do with the scamper method, okay? Well, that's a piece of it, right? Which I've included, of course. Let's back it out and focus on the present moment and where we are with each other and what we're doing right now. I've included that so that they can let go of their fears and apprehensions, so they can stop thinking about what happened earlier in usually I'm at a conference or something, so there's a bunch of sessions and people are reviewing notes and not really paying attention. Let's let go of that and be here now, like the book. And also not think about what may or may not happen in the future, worrying about things that may or may not come to pass, like paying a check on a bill that may never come due, to paraphrase somebody somewhere sometime. So that's all part of it too. Is just being present is very freeing, right? Having a structure like Scamper is very liberating as well. Okay, another one of my categories here. Let's just go through them. I pulled a few out for you. So focus. So here's an example from the focus portion. Draw a picture of the problem. Right? We can express things in three ways: words, pictures, and numbers. So in a typical brainstorming session, it's all words. Well, let's picture it. Let's visualize it. Then people are like, well, I can't draw. Okay, there's many ways you can do that. It could be a stick figure, an icon, a cartoon, abstract art, shapes and colors, right? How do things line up, intersect? What is it? What color does this feel like to you? What shape does this expresses this to you? That can unlock things. It can create new connections, is what that does. So it gives them the tools to be able to think about creativity without having to know where it comes from, right? Then we go to perspective, and I'll give you a bunch of different examples. So it's not enough to just say to someone inexperienced in this skill set, change your perspective, look at it from another point of view. They're going to freeze and go, what does that mean? What other point of view can I possibly know than the one that is locked within this, right? Okay, here's an example. Become it. Gain insights into your issue by merging yourself with the subject. Like Einstein, imagining himself riding on a beam of light, which is his most famous thought experiment. Look at the issue as though you yourself were connected to it, and then communicate what did you discover as a result of that brief thought experiment. So I'm giving them the tools and the steps to fulfill. Then transform. That's mostly the scamper stuff. This card is reverse, but then I'll tie it to popular culture, like episode 86 of Seinfeld. If every instinct you have is wrong, then the opposite would have to be right. Did you ever see that? The opposite?
Yeah, no. Seinfeld wasn't the biggest thing where I came from, but
not over there. Okay, no. Well, here in America. So then when people, especially if you tie it together with something from their own experience, like a TV show or movie or cartoon, from my experiences, then they're like, oh yeah, I remember, because everything that George was doing wasn't working. So he thought, well, I'll do the opposite and see what happens. And what happens was the opposite kind of experience. That gives them context, right? Makes it less mysterious and more accessible. Then we move on to the question phase of the cards. And then I use my background as a hypnotist, of course, for some of these to break people out of the thought patterns and the habits that they may already have. So for this particular question card, it's you already know. Okay. So let's think a little more deeply about, usually in a brainstorming session, people put an idea on a Post-it note and stick it on a wall and then walk away from that Post-it note. Now let's go back to it and let's ask some questions about it and go explore it deeper. So for this one, question, you already know. If you did know the answer to this problem, what would it be? Language pattern. People come to hypnotists and say something like, I can't find this, piece of jewelry that my grandmother handed down to me and it's very precious to me, and I lost it somewhere in the house. I have no idea where it is, right? Can you hypnotize me? Well, hypnosis can occur whether your eyes are open or closed. It's a brainwave state. It's theta state. And we go into that many times throughout the day and night, whether we're asleep or not. People think it's like snap your fingers, you go into a deep sleep, and it's TV in the movies. It's not how it works. You can trick people into getting into theta brainwave state with a hypnotic language pattern. So that's one of these patterns. And then when you say, well, if you did know where that lost item is, and if you did know where it was, where would it be? And then sometimes they'll just blurt it right out. It'll free their subconscious mind to come forward past the limitation of their language, saying I can't or I don't know, the sorts of things that will block the ideas from coming forward. So with these question cards, I use a lot of hypnotic language techniques in there.
And I'm finally, sure we could probably go through all 54, but yeah, if people want to check them out, then I'd highly recommend. We'll get the links down to them afterwards. Cool. But Josh, I just want to leave you with one sort of parting question. From the work you've been doing recently, especially when you're one-on-one with people or in these big conference settings, what are some examples that you've encountered recently where people have immediately seen things differently when you've explained them to them, and explained something to them, where you've unlocked some mindset or some different way of thinking about creativity?
Yeah, I would say that would happen right at the very beginning of my keynote. Because I come out to deliver a speech, people are accustomed to, oh, I'm going to get a story, or I'm going to get a statistic, or I'm going to get 3 ways to do whatever. And instead, and you're supposed to put your phones away. I tell everybody to take them out. And we do an interactive process where I'm having people put numbers into the calculator function on the phone. And then those numbers create a total. And then the total appears to be very random because everything that set it up was very random. And then I say, look, nothing is random. Everything is connected. This is the only time in our lives that we're all going to be in this place with this group of people for this, to have this shared experience. And then the revelation of what those numbers mean and what they represent, that's that moment where their brains get unstuck. This happens in the first 5 minutes of my keynote, and it's a psychological illusion of it, but it gets them unstuck. And they come up afterwards and they're like, prior to that moment, I wasn't really here. I was on the phone. I was dealing with things back home. I was thinking about how many emails I'm going to have to address as a result of taking this day off to have this experience. And when you sort of flip the script in that way, I had assumed was hiding, the true possibility of the expression, in this case, of those numbers. Yeah, suddenly it changed my perspective on everything. I became more aware, I became more connected, and that allowed the collaboration to take place, from whence emerge any new ideas or innovations that are going to come out of the rest of that experience. I feel like that's really my job, to create a shared emotional experience that snaps people out of the way that they're typically doing things, thinking, and leading their lives, so that they can have something new come in. Something new has to happen if you're going to have ideas that are revolutionary, creative, disruptive, or innovative. Then doing things the way that you've done them and coming from the places where you've gotten those ideas will be insufficient. You need to come in from somewhere different. That's why me coming from the arts, I think, is more valuable than someone coming from within their own industry, an expert or something like that. Not to discourage people from achieving expertise in their fields, because I think that is very important. and that there, especially in America, there is currently the triumph of idiocy, and like opinions being lauded as being equal to facts, and expertise being diminished, and people with loud voices, essentially, being elevated. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making new connections by getting the spark of inspiration from an unexpected place. And I think I am that unexpected person in place because I've led a very weird life and thought very deeply about this stuff.
Perfect. Josh, it's been wonderful speaking with you today. If people want to find out more, find out about your work, your books, your speaking, your cards, what's the best way they can go about finding out more?
JoshuaSeth.com, just my name, JoshuaSeth.com. You can bounce from there to any social media, but I'll warn you, I limit it. I'm mostly off. I'll make one post a day and check everything out once a day, and that's about it. But you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram if you so desire. But the main place where everything's housed is JoshuaSeth.com.
Perfect. I'll make sure to get a link down in the description below. Josh, it's been wonderful having you here, and I look forward to speaking again with you soon.
Lovely speaking with you too, sir. Cheerio. Toodle pip.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what you thought and what you'd like to see more about. If you want to take your creativity and innovation capabilities to the next level, then invest in yourself with the premium training only available at ideatovalue.com. These exclusive training modules have all been put together by me, Nick Skillicorn, and have been used by thousands of artists, innovation leaders, and CEOs to become better at understanding the source of their creativity and executing on their innovation ambitions. And there is no risk to you, as they're backed by our money-back guarantee. Now, don't forget to go out there and make your ideas a reality. See you again soon.